I always find it amusing when people want to talk to me about how to do this stuff because I don't know. You just kind of got to jump in and learn as you go. As soon as you start asking that question, what might God be doing? Or what do we think God is doing? As soon as you open up to the Holy Spirit and say, okay, we want to know what you want us to do. I mean, it's like, I often say this, buckle up, because she's going to take you for a ride, right? Like, she's not just going to ignore that invitation. She's just going to start working. You might ignore it, but she's not going to ignore it. Stevens Point is a small-ish city. It's between 27 and 30,000. It is predominantly white. We do have some of the population that's Hmong. We have some population that would be Latino or Latinx. Most of those are migrant workers, not all of them. A lot of blue collar, but also white collar, the mix, because we have the university, which changes the atmosphere. We have a lot of arts in the area. We also have some paper mills. Stevens Point politically is a blue dot on the map and tends to have some edges of being progressive, but not completely. It's a mixed bag. There's also, it's surrounded by rural. So we also have a lot of farms and farmers, especially in the county. So it's an interesting mix.
Beloved community is two churches, Redeemer Lutheran and then Intercession Episcopal. So I originally started working at Intercession. Intercession was downtown and in this big, beautiful building. And then that's when Mother Jane came on, and we were able to join this other community that had like-minded values, was kind of seeking direction.
When I came as a leader, I kind of understood my role as the problem solver. And they thought I was the problem solver. So my original thought was, well, we can make this happen, and then people will come in and, hold it up or carry it forward. And that did happen sometimes. But a lot of times, people were like, oh, it's great that you're doing that. Oh, that's great. Love it. Or they would think it was great that it was happening, but they weren't partaking in it. Trying to solve those big, huge problems is impossible. And one could wear oneself out. After a couple of years, I was really kind of worn down and was like, this is not working. This is not working. I don't think this is what we're supposed to be doing. Not knowing what else to do. You start to feel like I'm failing. And I think probably at that moment, you have to make a decision. And there was a part of me that thought, I'm not a fit here. I think I could probably be a good priest somewhere. Maybe I should go be a priest somewhere else. Because I know what I'm doing. Well, there are some good things. It's not moving us into a better position. And I did think about leaving. It kind of opened up this possibility that I could do that. That didn't work out. And I had to think, okay, God, what the heck? Right? And there were like these successes in the sense that we had new people come. We had some growth. We had engagement, but it was so me-centered. So I found myself quite drained and just losing my joy. That was when I said, Jane, this isn't working. You have got to figure out something else. I started reading lots of different things about the missional church and some from Dwight Chiley and other folks like Alan Roxburgh, and got really excited because this idea of helping people to talk about what God is doing and how do we join in with what God's doing, and it really fit with my sense of what I thought the church was, which wasn't a building or even necessarily just a place to come to worship, so then limited to Sundays. It was really about being a people who lived out God's love in the world. So we created a little team called the Mission Action Team, and it unfolded this vision of trying to be, Rowan Williams called it a mixed economy church. So you're dealing with the church that's that original paradigm, but you're starting to figure out ways to experiment in those missional kind of communities, going outside of the church walls, and how to have the capacity to do that. So we had unfolded a 3-year vision about how we might begin to do that work.
We had this grand vision of having these different kind of groups taking on big areas of issues that we saw. And so we saw a lot of interesting things come out of that, and it was just where people felt called to serve.
And so some of those people from the church who really resonated with that idea, so they kind of were raised up in the original paradigm, but they knew that there needed to be more. We spent a good couple of months just talking about what we were reading, what we were understanding. We talked about what each of us brought to the table, what skills we have, about the connections that we have in the wider community, wondering and discerning where God might be asking us to bring those gifts and those connections. What were the doors that were opening? I was asking leadership to think differently. One of the big questions I said we needed to change was we had to quit asking the question, how do we fix the church? And we had to just start asking the question, how do we live into the kingdom? And so the Mission Action Team started that work, and we're looking for how we could partner in the community. At the same time, our building started to get used by the community because of some of the work that we've been doing with some partners to be a warming center. We were just opening up a warming center in Stevens Point. We weren't running the center, we were just going to be the space.
One of the main things that came out of that was the homeless, feeding homeless people in the park on Saturday mornings. And it just was one of those things that kind of rose up and then went away. It wasn't a long-term program. It was just where people felt called to serve.
That really, got us connected to folks downtown, to the homeless population, but also now to all the folks who are working, all the different partnerships. And it's just kind of gone crazy from there, and always changing, but still very much at the center of what we do. So I started talking about our experiences with folks and how there were so many resources, but people were still falling through the gaps. And that connected. So we created a mission and a vision together as clergy, and then we invited community partners in. And now all these people are like, yes, yes, yes. And some people are like, we've tried to do this before, and here's where it's failed before. So this is still on a journey, but it's a success, and it feels that way because doors keep opening.
Now, a student getting a degree in social work. She asked me specifically yesterday, hey, how can I help out? What can I do? Is there something I can do with One Big Tent?
Absolutely.
I would say at least half of my time, if not more, is out in the community, attending community meetings, talking about issues in the community, and just building community partnerships, attending meetings with other clergy in town. And from those partnerships, if you're listening, you're going to hear where your space might have some answers. And that's how the Community Blood Center ended up coming here, because they heard out in the community that we had a space and maybe they could use it. And when the Winter Farmers Market was starting up and they started looking around, we had the gym, and we were looking for ways for the gym to be used. But the interesting thing is, as people start to use it, now people in the community go, hey, there's a church over there that has a space. Or what about that church? What about that church where we go to the Winter Farmers Market, right? Because they've been in this space now. So they've seen the space. And so now for people out there who've been here, this becomes a possibility. And so you have to have that kind of dual people here thinking of this space not just as theirs, but also as a ministry for the community, and then people out in the community who know this as a space that might be a possibility.
We have a very strong justice team here, and they recently had someone come on the Sunday to speak about voting and how to vote, where to vote, when to vote, all these things just really that are appropriately timed, and so they do letter writing campaigns to people. And so it's a very active group.
They saw a news story on a hospital a little north of us who was doing like a flu clinic, and they want to get as many people as they could. So they also were going to have a meal there. And then, so the person brought to the compassion response team, how do we make this happen here? And so, hey, I know somebody at the hospital, and I'm just sitting back. Now they just kind of come up with all their own ideas. Okay,
To me, it seems that it needs to come from a welling up from people in the congregation. Because what happens, or what I've seen happen, is that when someone in the leadership is like, we are going to do this, they are then the leader, and they are just calling people up from underneath them to support them in that mission or vision. Whereas if it's upwelling from an individual and they've created a group around it within the congregation, and the leadership person can take on a supporting role, that has a lot more staying power and a lot more energy behind it.
So success feels like when it isn't just you doing it and you are finding those connections and doors keep opening. And failure is when, to me, has always felt like when either I've done it by myself or a very small group, and it doesn't move beyond that, doesn't move beyond me or that small group. If it stays, that small group might be passionate about it, but they're going to wear themselves down to the bare nubbin. So if it doesn't catch on, the Holy Spirit's about fire. So if that fire doesn't catch on somewhere, doesn't catch on in energy, doesn't catch on in resources, doesn't catch on in interest, you might want to set that aside for a while. It might be a great idea. It usually is. But if it doesn't gain traction somehow, it's not the time for it, you're not the people for it, it's not the place for it, and just set it over here. If it seems like another time to bring it up, great. If it's a success, it's going to gain traction, doors are going to open. I hope you have your seatbelt on because it's just going to go, right?
I see connections being made in ways that I don't know that anybody thought they were going to be making connections.
Good morning, beloved. Good morning. Welcome to morning prayer at the beloved community.
There's just an incredible creativity that has been happening, not only for our worships, but also in how people are figuring out how to be neighbors and people that care for each other. And, it's holy work that they're really taking on.
When I stopped becoming a problem solver, I kind of had to redefine for myself what my job was. It was like getting, fresh air again and giving up that role of problem solver, which, it's like skinning an onion, layer after layer. And frankly, those layers can grow back and you kind of have to reskin them because you kind of have to remind yourself, yeah, that's not my job. Because people want it to be your job. And there's a part of you that thinks it is your job. So that's always a relearning. But the change for me has been so life-giving. Like, there's still problems, there's still issues, but it's like how I can respond to them is completely different. And I don't see myself as the answer. And it's almost always starts with a pause, step back, let's listen, what's going on here? Key question, what is my role, if anything? Right? And who else might be brought to the table? It's a game changer. I'm trying to create an environment where people feel safe enough to experiment and to fail. And that means you got to leave space for the Holy Spirit, right? You got to leave this breathing room. And so learning how to do that is big personally. And then that also means that you have to come to the community and say, we don't have all the answers. And that means when we experiment, we're going to get it wrong sometimes. And that's okay. Because when we get it wrong, we learn from that. Right? And failure's okay. What's not okay is not asking the question that leads to the trying, or to fail and then be like, I'm done with it. Right? I'm just done. That's over. So failure is crucial. Because what it does, if you ask the questions, it gives you your next steps. It gives you your next part of the path. So it's not an end ever. It's like a nudge to the next thing. I think we have to start figuring out what our steps are for those things we identified, getting more faith communities involved. But you have to give yourself permission and your team's permission to fail, and to have an environment where there's an expectation that there will be failures, as opposed to the other way, that we're always going to get it right. The people here in this beloved community of Intercession Episcopal and Redeemer Lutheran belong to me, and I belong to them. But the people who aren't members belong to me, and I belong to them. Right? So the vision can't stop here. And how we think of who we're supposed to take care of can't stop here. It really has to exceed that.
When you have all these people who have this vision and drive and support, there's just an energy that uplifts and really motivates people to participate in the way they can.
Early on, we decided that we had the answers. The church decided it was the problem solver. And as soon as we take that position, we knock the Holy Spirit off her throne, because that's her work. And our work is to listen and to see where healing needs to happen, and then to say, what role do I have in that? What role do we have in that? How do I help? Or do I not? Maybe that's not my role at all, right? Then the Holy Spirit, again, you open that door, she's just going to take you for a ride.